everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Lollygaggers Dynasty Recap. I am your host, Ari, aka Zang. I will be your spiritual baseball Svengali throughout this season. As you all know, I am normally joined by Ace Garcia. He is unavailable tonight, but will be joining me soon for some more episodes and obviously throughout the season. You all know him probably as the Texas relief pitcher. He says it's not him, but I'm just saying we've never recorded at the same time as Texas Rangers have played a game. So explain that one, Ace. No, folks, it is so good to be back. Obviously, last year we had an amazing first season in the Dynasty League. It was just a great time all around. A lot of us had played fantasy baseball together before that, and then kind of coming all together and doing the Dynasty thing. It was just such a great time, and of course ended with the eventual champion, Mike, winning our first league. And I have to say I'm feeling maybe even more excited about this year, and that's kind of the cool thing about Dynasty is, we're starting to build real investments in these guys, and that is pretty fun. So obviously we made some pretty awesome changes throughout the offseason, most notably, of course, expanding to 14 teams, adding Min and KJ into the league. I know we're all super excited to have them and think it's just going to make what was, a great situation even better. So today is just kind of a little a recap. We're going to go over the drafts, kind of talk those over. A good portion of this is going to be trade talk. There have been a ton of trades. I can kind of tell that fantasy baseball season is really back because, I'll teach a class and I'll be teaching, and then kids are gone, whatever, and I'll check my phone and there are 18 notifications on there from Fantrax, and like 12 of them are trades from Mike and Al Martinet, and I'm like, you know what, we're back. Fantasy season is in. So we will be going over all of those trades, of course, and then just a little bit of a wrap up on some things coming up soon before the season. So welcome back. It's so great to be back for season 2. And we'll start out by, of course, talking over that expansion draft. So, obviously, you all were a part of the process, so we don't really need to go over it. But, our two new expansion teams picked from some select pools to kind of build out their rosters. And I've mentioned this maybe once or twice in the Discord, but I think this is going to be a fascinating look into kind of what makes a good team in this league. I think that KJ and Min both have teams, or I should say at least they drafted teams. Both have done a lot of trading, so maybe it won't be that good a look now that I say it. But they both had teams that were really strong middle grounds. They didn't have that super high-end talent, the 700 point projected type guys, but they also didn't really have those lower ones. I think it'll be really fascinating to see how they fare in this first season. All the testaments to them as they rack up wins this season, however many that may be for each team, because a lot of it is coming by their own merit. They're doing a lot of trading to get this done, and obviously they didn't have the opportunity to draft the Gunnar Hendersons, the Bobby Witts, the Aaron Judges in the first round of like our first draft, and those types of guys weren't really available in the expansion draft. So really looking forward to seeing how they look. For this, we'll just kind of be breaking down the pools themselves and who was drafted in each pool, and then just some quick thoughts. So, of course, taken first overall, I will just highlight that was Garrett Cole. I have to say, the second I saw those lists and I knew Min was somebody drafting, I had a feeling that if he had the first pick, Garrett Cole would be off the board first, and lo and behold, Min with the first pick did select Garrett Cole. But let's start up here in Pool A. This was batters projected with 450 plus points. So Min, for this one, took Riley Green, obviously the outfielder from KJ's Tigers. And KJ took Alec Burleson, who is a sort of corner outfielder, first base type for the Cardinals. Burleson in particular, I think is going to get a lot more run this year as he becomes kind of one of the like top of the order, heart of the order bats. Obviously the Cardinals have traded off a lot of guys. And Riley Green is really one of the young sort of unsung stars in the league. There is a bit of a strikeout problem. We all know that, over 200 Ks last year, but real power, and just that like raw athleticism that you want to see. And pretty young too, I think still in his, mid 20s. So, those are obviously sort of like the top guys they got as bats. A couple names left on the board that were notable. Eugenio Suarez, obviously with that big strikeout problem. Speaking of which, we did see Randy Arozarena left out there. And also Jurickson Profar, who obviously is an interesting case with the PED situation last year, but he was pretty great for JMC, who got him off the waiver wire last year once he came back. So we'll bounce over to Pool B, which were pitchers projected over 500 plus points. So obviously this is kind of the ace of their staff. KJ selected Gavin Williams from JMC's team out of Cleveland. Williams is just a classic Cleveland pitcher, kind of unassuming, and seems a little bit like a creative player, and then he pitches against your team, and you say, Jesus, where did this guy, it's just unbelievable stuff. Really great pitcher. And then Nick Lodolo actually went to Min's team here. Nick Lodolo, of course, sort of the famous waiver wire pickup by Prius last year. Just a really great guy in that Reds rotation, which is phenomenal, and also on the younger side to my memory. Few key names left on the board here. Sonny Gray, only guy put up across the entire draft projected over 600. He is on the older side, of course, 34. So there's some understanding, to be nervous there. Blake Snell, 2-time Cy Young Award winner, but what are you really going to get from year to year? That's a scary one. And then Andrew Abbott is that last name. He was phenomenal if you look back at that Red season last year. A really, really, really just quietly strong performer for Serial in ultimately what wasn't a great season. But Andrew Abbott, who I believe, if I'm remembering correct, was a waiver wire, a free agency pickup, was a really great piece on that team. So those are a few guys left out there, but certainly they made out with some pretty strong pitchers. Then the final of those top three pools, which will sort of be the ace to their bullpen, their closers, is the reliever projected 300 plus points. Pete Fairbanks went to KJ's team from Bose. We see the former Ray, who I believe is now in Miami, I want to say. Obviously great closer, and he's got the crazy eyes, so he has that weird quirk that you want in a closer. And then David Bednar went from in 10 over to Min. Definitely saw that one, similar to the Garrett Cole thing. Saw that one coming. In 10, of course, had him as a Pirate, and as we Red Sox fans do once people become Yankees, we don't tend to want them on our team as much anymore. So in 10, although David Bednar, obviously a phenomenal relief pitcher, was perhaps not too sad to lose him. Emilio Pagan left on the board from JMC's team. And then an interesting one in Tanner Scott, who obviously got that massive contract last offseason and looked like probably one of the 10 best relief pitchers to have maybe in fantasy baseball, period, just based off his, how much they were using him as a lefty out of that bullpen. The Dodgers were, supposed to use him. But then obviously a really tough year last year. Flaming Prius is definitely going to be looking for him to bounce back, as if the man needed any more pitching. But so those just a couple key names left on the board there. We'll move a little bit quicker through these next pools as there are obviously more guys. Pool D, where we had the batters projected 300 plus points. I'll start by going over Mins. This, obviously built out sort of the core of their lineup. He took Seiya Suzuki, Jeremy Pena, TJ Friedel, Spencer Steer, Xavier Edwards, Noelvi Marte, Jason Dominguez, and Austin Wells. Obviously picked up a couple of Yankees at the end there. A nice breakout from Noelvi Marte last year, and then just some really solid middle and top of the order, respectively, in Seiya Suzuki and Jeremy Pena, who I think will fill out Min's roster very nicely. They're going to do some great stuff. Over on KJ's side, Ivan Herrera, who I want to check. I can't remember if he still has catcher eligibility now that I think about it, but certainly had it last year. I can't find it. I don't believe he does. I think he might just be utility at this point. But great hitter out in St. Louis. He also got Bryson Stott, Mason Wynn, second Cardinal there, Evan Carter, Wheeler Abreu, Brooks Lee, Sal Stewart, and to close it out, Kyle Teal, the young catcher from Chicago. I think a solid group from KJ here. I really like the pickups of Abreu, obviously. You'll hear why later. And Sal Stewart, I think, is one of the steals of this draft. he was ultimately moved, and I think we are going to see him be successful, but obviously the pieces that KJ was able to get back from him were pretty great. So we will now move down to Pool E. Starters projected 400 plus. We'll start with KJ this time. He took Ryan Pepio, Merrill Kelly, Jose Barrios, Aaron Nola, and Justin Steele. Those were sort of the starters he grabbed. Men went a little bit different as he started off by grabbing some younger guys with Luis Heel and Connolly early, and then a little bit more stability. Obviously, Garrett Cole, as we mentioned, and then Shane Bieber and Brian Bayo to close things out, a couple AL East guys. I think that this is the strongest part of the draft. There's some real names here, and we have frankly seen quite a few of these guys moved for legit pieces. These are real pitchers. Bryce Miller was intended to be taken in this round by me from me. I did end up offering a pick to KJ and a sort of supplemental pick to Min to sort of buy his protection, which ended up benefiting me later as he would be a part of the a historic trade in the Lollygaggers League. Quickly now, just through the relievers, Garrett Whitlock, Phil Maton, and Jojo Romero made their way onto Min's team, and Jeff Hoffman, Camilo Doval, and Orion Kirkering joined KJ Lee and his squad. Won't go over the minor leaguers. Obviously, this document is there. Don't want to spend too much time here just kind of yapping about what we've got, but that is what the expansion draft kind of looked like. It was really interesting to see which guys went. I did kind of a practice mock draft beforehand, and it ended up very different. I think that's the case for kind of how a lot of people saw it. I think a lot of people we expected to go in the draft didn't, for a combination of reasons. Things like age, maybe, projecting fall-offs from strong performances last year, which kind of maybe let them qualify for some of those thresholds, the 450 points for batters, the 500 for pitchers, but maybe these guys were kind of projecting them fall off a little bit. So really interesting process to watch that all go down. And of course, following that, we did have our supplemental draft. I won't really go over that. It was just sort of a chance where we tried to fill out some of the rosters that really took pretty heavy hits during the expansion draft. And with some time to talk, I guess I would like to issue sort of an apology just in general. With 2020 hindsight, I think there definitely should have been a cap on total players taken per team. Again, as I did kind of that mock draft, most teams were losing between 3 and 5 people, and it didn't seem so bad. When it ended up going down, it didn't end up like that. As you all know, there were a couple teams there that lost 7 players, and even a couple that lost 6. And on the other end, we had some people that only lost 1 or 2. So that ended up not being balanced. And, I would like to, I guess, offer mea culpa to those people whose rosters took pretty significant hits. And hopefully that supplemental draft was at least enough just to, get a little bit of a boost back in and fill some of those spots. So hopefully, I don't have to say, I don't imagine us expanding again. But I just thank you all for your honest feedback in that time. I appreciate people being, kind of like, hey, I don't feel great about this. And it was something we kind of unfortunately realized by the time it was too late. So, again, thank you all for your, I guess, understanding that this is the first time for me as well. And I hope that, we're able to kind of move forward, positively. So, moving on from that, we will, of course, now move to the FYPD, the first-year player draft. I love the first-year player draft. There's so much fun stuff to dig into. We'll quickly, I will cover everyone in the first round because those are some pretty significant players, just kind of touching on each of them. And then I've chosen one player from the second, third, fourth, and fifth rounds to kind of highlight as, this is a guy to keep an eye on through that round. 6 through 8, I have to say, you can take a look at the draft board. There aren't a lot of big names on there. And so to save you all time and all that, we just sort of focused on those first 5. So obviously with the first overall pick in the first year player draft, The Cuyahoga Black Panthers, serial killer, took Tatsuya Imai. And this was a fascinating situation. This is going to be a theme that I think you all hear a lot from me when it comes to first-year player drafts, where there are a few things I really like to take into account, and one thing I really like to take into account is what MLB teams seem to think of guys. As much as we all love doing this stuff, the people in the front offices are really smart and know what they're doing. I think when you see a guy at Imai's age of 26, 27, who has a sub-2 ERA, who has the type of strikeout numbers he has, I think across the league we sort of thought we would be looking at a Yamamoto light type contract. Maybe not in the dollars per se, but definitely in the years. What he ended up signing was essentially a 1-year deal with Houston. Obviously, it is technically for 3 years, but there are those opt-outs. And so the market just wasn't quite as robust as I think we expected. That being said, this is a guy who last year, we were talking about the last season of baseball he played, through a 1.94 ERA and has unbelievable swing and miss stuff. And he's going to one of the best organizations for pitching in MLB. I think this is a phenomenal pick. And it is an interesting signaling, I think, from serial killers to take a guy who is, I think, from a first-year player draft perspective, very much a win-now piece. Obviously, serial killers getting the first overall pick after finishing last in the league. I think in some ways, this is kind of a signal of like, he's pushing. This is not, a full-on rebuild, so to speak. Imai, I think I have to say was probably the right pick for 1 overall. I did initially try and actually trade for this pick because I was hoping to take Imai. Trade didn't end up working out. And so I thought, all right, what are we going to do? And I dug into some video, and I ended up being really happy with taking Cade Anderson at 2nd overall, as he was drafted to the Portland Pioneers. He came out of LSU for college. I think LSU, Vandy, those are kind of those 2 schools you really want to look at for pitchers. I think those are where a lot of the best pitchers come out of. So seeing that, and he is just everything you want in a pitcher. He's got the great fastball with a great shape that plays really nicely, not super high velocity, but just a great shape that plays really nicely, and phenomenal secondaries. And maybe one of the biggest selling points on top of all that stuff for me was the organization he went to. He went to the Mariners, who, on top of having one of the best parks for pitching, I think you're fooling yourself if you think anyone in the league is better at developing pitching than them. It just doesn't get much better than that. So having a guy with those type of tools, going into that environment, into that system, coming from a program like he did, and go watch some tape of the guy. He's unbelievable. I'm really, really high on this pick, and I'm really excited about it. Number 3 overall, we saw, I would say, the most interesting pick of this round. We saw Munetaka Murakami go to the Valley Gift Lords. Of course, Al Martinet's team there. As recently as last July, right? This was at the All-Star break. Ace and I recorded a podcast that was kind of a first-year player draft preview. And it was basically, who's going to get Murakami? And then some of the numbers started to come out this offseason. The strikeout rate is concerning. The power numbers are mouth-watering. He ended up signing a deal with the Chicago White Sox, which I actually think is going to be a great environment for him. He's going to be able to kind of just figure it out and let loose without the super high pressure of like a Yankees or Dodgers, like we initially thought he might be headed towards. This could end up looking like a steal at 3rd overall. This could end up looking like a pretty tough pick at 3rd overall. And without trying to be too hyperbolic, I feel like it's going to be one or the other. I can't really see this being a middle ground pick. I think we could see, he's hit 50 plus homers in a season. Also through, and it's spring training, but through his, first week of spring training, he struck out close to 35% of the time. I think this is a massive boom or massive bust pick. frankly, seeing some of his swings, I'm kind of leaning towards Boom. It's so early, we really can't say. But Al Martinet, with another sort of win now move, shores up third base for him. Sticking in the Japanese market, Kazuma Okamoto went fourth overall to the Seoul Sovereigns in 10's team. He's listed as first base, third base, so he will maintain that eligibility through the end of this year. I'll be surprised if he holds first base through next year, just knowing Vlad is there. I would be surprised if he gets 10 games at first base to get that eligibility, but you never know. Primarily a third base guy, and sort of Murakami light in all senses. Better hit tool, less power, better defender, but I think just really a phenomenal pick, and great pickup by the Blue Jays, and I think he's just going into a great situation over there where, again, he doesn't need to be the star, in kind of a different way from Murakami. But, they've got Vlad, they've got Springer, they've got their guys, and, Okamoto can hit fifth, he can hit sixth, and just, really do some pretty significant damage, in the later part of that lineup. Great pick from Inten. Fifth overall, we saw Seth Hernandez, the first high school player off the board, go to the Southwest Kansas Rabid Coyotes, Okie Sooners team. Seth Hernandez has some great stuff, phenomenal stuff. Something that really interests me about him, similarly to Cade, he was a Vanderbilt commit. He obviously didn't end up going, but this is a program in Vandy that saw this guy and wanted him as a part of their program. We know what they do for pitchers, and so that's just always a little bit of a green flag for me when you see these guys, committing to schools, even if they don't end up attending. Huge stuff for Hernandez. He's really young, really talented. And the Pirates, sneaky, have become kind of a pitching factory in the last few years, if we're talking about it. Between, Skeens and, no longer there, but, Luis Ortiz is obviously another one. Quinn Priester came out of that system, traded to the Sox, and then over to the Brewers. Bubba Chandler, they've, oh God, what's the other guy? Jared Jones is the last name I'm thinking of. They've got quite a few really, really talented pitchers, and not just from, we got him first overall like they did with Skeens. So I really like this pick of Seth Hernandez. It's going to take a few years for him to get to the bigs, obviously being a younger guy coming fresh out of high school, but by the time he gets there, I think it is going to be great. Sixth overall, we saw the Arizona Asphalt take Andreas Jimenez. Interesting strategy from Ace, who I think is, in a lot of ways here, leaning into, let's fucking win right now, pardon my French. Andres Jimenez, obviously we know what he is. He kind of plays every day, great defender, so we know he's going to get the reps. Solid contact bat, obviously had that phenomenal season back in 2021 when he was with Cleveland at the time, and I think we'll be playing shortstop for the Blue Jays this year, if I remember correctly. So interesting pick from Ace, obviously going with an established major leaguer here instead of a young guy, but I think it's a pretty cool way to kind of plant his flag and say, no, fuck it, we ball. We're going this year. So that is with Andres Jimenez heading there this year. And through this year, at least, he does maintain that second base eligibility as well. So in probably, I would say, the most shallow position, maybe outside of catcher, although second base is pretty tough. Get a guy there. Eli Willits, the first overall pick in the MLB draft, went 7th overall to the Arctic Real Survivors men's team. This was the first pick by an expansion team here. And Willits, similarly to Seth Hernandez, is a high school guy, so we probably won't see him for a few years, but he's got all the talent. He went first overall for a reason. He is, the projections I've read on him are basically it's almost impossible for this guy not to be a 5-tool player. How the degree of that 5-tool, we'll see what it is, but he just does everything. Son of a former major leaguer, we always love to see. And he's in a system where he's going to get the run. I think Washington is going to be careful with his development. They're going to make sure it is done right. And when he comes up, there's not going to be anyone blocking him. A lot of their future is banked on this kid. And I think that is something that factors into fantasy value. Sunmin Song went 8th overall to Sault Ste. Marie Lux. He is another one of the guys coming over from the Eastern Leagues. He's a second base, third base kind of utility infield type. Seems like KJ here is kind of betting on him to sort of take on a larger role in the Padres. We know they're kind of in flux, like everywhere. And you can definitely see a guy coming over and just making a name for himself, similarly to how Ha-Seong Kim did in the Padres system a few years ago. I think really interesting stuff from Song, and at the very least, he's a versatile defensive player, so you can slot him in a lot of places. We all know how valuable that can be with daily lineups. 9th overall, the Fenton Melonheads took Liam Doyle. Liam Doyle almost went 2nd overall. It was a coin flip between him and Cade Anderson. He has the stuff. It is that top fastball, and good, not great secondaries. But the fastball plays, man. Like, could play in MLB to start this year plays. Huge guy, big bodied frame. University of Tennessee guy, which is another obviously great college program. And the Cardinals are in a rebuild, which is kind of a weird thing to see just for that organization, but they are fully in a rebuild. And Doyle's going to get some legit run. I would not be shocked to see him come up end of this year. And I think he'll probably have a spot in the 2027 Cardinals rotation, probably near the top of it. I think getting Doyle at the 9th pick is a really great value here for Big Peach. And there's some huge boom potential, especially, if we see those secondaries develop. Ethan Holiday went 10th overall to the North Pole Natty Bows. Of course, Bows, Bros, and O's keeping that moniker of his name in the new team name. But we all know the Holidays. Of course, Matt, the dad, produced these 2 shortstop sons, Ethan, the younger, and he went to Colorado, which is just awesome to see Matt Holiday's kid playing in Colorado. Massive power, massive power. Definitely more swing and miss concerns than his brother. And a little bit more defensive concern as well. He definitely profiles more as a corner infield guy, probably third base, maybe first base, way down the line in his career. But with that comes the big body and, the big power. We all know what cores can do for that. And I talked about it a little bit earlier with Willits, but son of a former major leaguer, especially a guy who played and succeeded in Colorado, that is valuable stuff, and we know the Holidays can play ball, so great pick by Bose there. Cuyahoga Black Panthers with the Bronx Bandoleros pick actually took a Yankee, Dex Kilby, 11th overall. Of course, Kilby would later be traded back to the Bandoleros, so he would make his way back to JMC as it was. But Dax Kilby, really smooth left-handed swing, and something you love to see is just a huge pro debut. He hit almost 340 when he made his pro debut last year. So if these guys don't get off to a great start and they make their pro debut the year they're drafted, I can kind of write it off. It's tough. Going from college ball or high school ball to pro ball is a really big step. On the flip side, if they do perform really well, like hitting almost 340, that is a massive green flag for me. And we saw Kilby do exactly that. So, you never know. He could end up making it into that Yankee system, I think, before too long. He is a high school guy, so definitely on that younger side. So probably looking at, minimum a year or 2 before we start to really have conversations about him. But great prospect and a great pick. Into, 12th overall, we had Jamie Arnold, the Athletics pitcher, go to the Joinville Friendly Capybaras. That is Hideki's team. Arnold was an FSU guy. He is an interesting case where I think going into the year, he was projected as kind of one of the, going into the college season, he was looked at as one of the top picks, maybe the top pick, and definitely had, I think, a tougher year at FSU. He's got number 3 potential. That's where he's at. And it doesn't feel like it's much lower than that, to be perfectly honest. With that comes massive boom potential as well. This is a guy who, again, up until this year, his junior year at FSU was unbelievable. That's what kind of gave him that pedigree. And then after the tougher senior year, he fell a bit in the draft, but this guy could boom. We know the A's know how to get the most out of their guys. There's, of course, a little bit of a concern with the ballpark they're in, but by the time he gets to the majors, they could be in a ballpark in Vegas. We don't know what that'll look like by then. So Caleb Bonnemer was the penultimate pick in our first round. He went to the St. Petersburg Tropopologists, of course, Flaming Prius's team there. Bonnemer was actually the first prospect picked who was eligible to be taken before the year. Interestingly, he had just similarly sort of to Dax Kilby, a massive end to 2025 in high A. Crazy stuff from him. The pull air percentage is unbelievable, and he has like serious raw power. This is a third base shortstop type guy for the White Sox. A little bit of a shaky hit tool, which is sort of the chief concern. Like he is still very young, and if he maintains that pull air power and the athleticism we've seen from him, he should be an easy hit for the St. Petersburg Tropopologists. And then with the final pick of the first round, the Washington State Winners traded their pick over the Portland Pioneers, and I selected Kyson Witherspoon, pitcher drafted out of Oklahoma to Boston. As I said, look, there's obviously a little bit of bias here, but Witherspoon is the exact type of arm Boston gets the most out of. Big body, 6'2", built like a fucking tank, and he's got a great fastball, good secondaries, and is already, they're talking about pushing him through. But Boston started pushing their guys pretty quick. Obviously, Peyton Tolley made his way up to the majors last year. So I think we could end up seeing Witherspoon in a bullpen role end of this year, and maybe even, in a starter's role in 2027 if things break right. So it's just kind of that arm that you want to bet on, and especially from a team like the Red Sox, who quietly over the last, 3-ish years have really become another one of those sort of pitching factory destinations. They've, produced some pretty impressive talent. I will move a little bit quicker through this next part. I don't want to hold you all here too long just listening to me yap by myself. Taking a sip of tea there. In the second round, we saw Ethan Conrad taken with the 5th pick by Southwest Kansas. The truest of true power speed guys. Really athletic, just like lithe and powerful swing. As with so many of these guys, there's some swing and miss concerns, but the sort of calling card to Ethan Conrad, who's taken 17th in the MLB draft, is like a lot of people have mentioned, like he could end up being the best hitter in this class. It's not a lock for him to be, but he has got that type of build, and that type of swing and power, and athleticism. And, those power speed guys are really hard to come by in the truest sense. So I really love that pick from the Rabid Coyotes there. Pardon me. Still working on the names. We're getting there. By midseason, we'll be fine. Steele Hall is my highlight. Fenton Melonheads took him with a pick they traded for from Sault Ste. Marie, the 8th pick in the 3rd round. Again, raw athleticism, definitely viewed as more of a hit tool guy, but as he made, I believe, his pro debut, you started to see some power potential starting. So those are kind of always the prospects that are really fascinating. He's a guy that have a great hit tool and then develop a power stroke to go with it. So, just an interesting guy to keep an eye on. Shortstop, third base type over in Cincinnati. Obviously a ballpark that helps him. This is the only one I will hype myself on a little bit. Wande Asain. I'm not sure how to say the last name. I grabbed in the 4th round with the 2nd pick. Let me start with the negatives. He's 16 years old. This is a high schooler. He is signed, from the international signing class, but he's 6 feet tall. He has that, you don't want to say slender, but sort of thin, athletic frame you really look for in these guys. And as I've said this 100 times, huge power potential. Really explosive lefty swing. That I think the Mets are frankly going to be able to get a lot out of. We talk about, being a while before we see Seth Hernandez and Dax Kilby. It's going to be a long time before we see this guy. Talking like 2030 potentially. But you look at the league, and many of the best players in the league are signed out of those international free agent classes. So I'm not at all saying he is one of those guys, but as we go along in this league, I think it's going to be really interesting to see who is able to pick out that international talent and grab it early. Because imagine if you grabbed Ronald Acuna when he was, just signed out of Venezuela. Imagine if you grabbed Ellie De La Cruz when he was 16 years old. These are top players in the league. So I think that Wandy is not to that caliber, obviously, but the type of guy who will become a really excellent major leaguer. So that was my selection for the 4th round. And then in the 5th round, this is sort of an organizational guy. Ethan Frey, in the 5th round with the, let's see, I had it. In the 5th round with the 5th pick went again to Southwest Kansas, to the Rabid Coyotes. So Oki's getting 2 names on here. I really like both of these picks. Frey's just a big guy, 6'6" outfielder. And like Kilby, huge pro debut. So you love to see that. He played at LSU, which I have obviously shared my thoughts on. Definitely some swing and miss. We saw strikeout rate in the high 20s, but he's got the physical tools. He's got the frame, and I trust the Astros. We've seen what they've done with guys like this before, and I just think they're going to get the most they can out of him. So for a 5th round pick, I think this is a really, really awesome selection for Oki Sooner. Thank you for listening to me yap and ramble on for, what has this been about now, 20 minutes or so of the FYPD. Hopefully that wasn't too much and you got some information out of that stuff. Let's jump into trades. So as you saw in the screenshot I sent, I did have to break this down into categories because, let's see, we're talking 24, we're talking 33... we're talking 37 trades, so we are not going to dive into all 37 of these trades, deep dive into them. We'll start with the first section, which is, that happened? ? Which is not, of course, to be rude. I'm sure there's going to be a guy in here that we're like, really? That's how, whoever got him? But we'll just quickly burn through these. The Arctic Real Survivors traded Phil Maton and the 7th pick in the 7th round, who ended up being Luis Rengifo, over to Sault Ste. Marie for Camilo Doval. Bandoleros traded Emilio Pagan, Aiden Smith, who is a center fielder in the Tampa Bay system, and Cody Ponce over to Cuyahoga for Dax Kilby. We, of course, mentioned that little bit of a homecoming there, although not for long. Fenton traded Connor Norby over to Sault Ste. Marie for pick the 8th pick in the 3rd round, which ended up being Steele Hall, who, of course, I highlighted earlier. We then saw the Locks trade pick 4-8, which I'll just refer to them as that from now on. That's round 4, pick 8, who ended up being Gavin Feen, over to the Washington State Winners for Jacob Lopez. Cuyahoga then traded 7-1, who became Braylon Payne, and 8-1, who was Chris Rodriguez, for 7-9, which was a pass. So these were just kind of 2 freebie picks there for, I believe it was Fenton who ended up making those picks. Obviously, we saw Cuyahoga and Serial Chillers with some kind of a full roster, so moving some picks around there. Sault Ste. Marie, the Locks then traded Graham Ashcraft to Cuyahoga for Justin Wroblewski and Gage Jump. We saw the Melonheads send Bobby Miller and CJ Kafis over to Sault Ste. Marie for Jason Adam, the Padres reliever. Arsenal, I'm going to do that more than once, ARS. Arctic Real Survivors then traded Dylan Lee to Sault Ste. Marie back for Phil Maton, making his way back to the Real Survivors there. Rabid Coyotes traded Johnny Farmello over to Washington for Harry Ford, sort of locking up what will likely be their catching position for the next few years, as Ford obviously made his way over to Washington. And Mike and the Washington State Winners get Johnny Farmello, who is a Seattle Mariners prospect, back. And then finally, the Soul Sovereigns traded Casey Mize for Matt Strom from the Sault Ste. Marie Locks. I will highlight this one a little bit. I said I wasn't going to do any highlighting. former first overall pick for Casey Mize. That's all I'll say. He's obviously got the talent. There is some trade history here with Casey Mize, which we know about, but Tigers fan in KJ will certainly be hoping for a good season from him. So our next section is minor moves. Pardon me. You talk for 30 minutes. I'm starting to get a little hoarse. I'll quickly burn through these, and then I do just want to sort of highlight three of them that I think will be some of the most talked about. So the Rabid Coyotes traded Adrian Hauser over to the asphalt for O'Neal Cruz, breaking up the Cruz parade that Ace had going on over there. Natty Bows traded Nick Castellanos over to Sault Ste. Marie for Kyle Teal. Portland traded Carlos Correa over to the Washington State Winners for Kyle Finnegan, and then the first round 14th pick, which ended up becoming Kyson Witherspoon. Cuyahoga traded Adolis Garcia and Kyle Leahy over to the Winners for Jeff Hoffman. The first trade I will highlight in this section is the Arctic Real Survivors, who traded Joey Cantillo and George Klassen to Sault Ste. Marie for Justin Steele. Justin Steele, people probably forget because he was obviously out all of last year with TJ. Really phenomenal pitcher for the Cubs, and I think could be a great member of Real Survivors rotation there. And Joey Cantillo, I'm planting my flag a little bit as a breakout pick for this coming year. This would not be the last time he is traded and not the last time he is highlighted in this section. Joinville then traded Sean Burke and Jordan Lawler, finally getting out from the shadow that was Jordan Lawler, over to the Valley Gift Lords for Brendan Donovan and a 2027 second-round pick and a 2028 third-round pick. So Friendly Capybara is stacking up a couple picks there and acquiring Brendan Donovan, who I think is a perfect fit in Seattle and fills a second base position where Joinville was already quite strong. They already have Ketel Marte, who's pretty much the consensus number one there. But of course, knowing how shallow second base is, getting Brendan Donovan there is great work. Real Survivors then traded Hassan Kim over to the Melonheads for Matt McLean, a valuable piece for the Real Survivors in a trade that's coming up later in the show. Fenton traded Andrew Vaughn to Sault Ste. Marie for Bryson Stott. Sault Ste. Marie traded my co-host Robert Garcia and Owen Murphy, who is an Atlanta starting pitching prospect, over to the Southwest Kansas Rabid Coyotes for Jason Adam and Alec Boehm. I'm starting to see a little bit of crossover here, guys who have been traded and then traded again from that team. North Pole traded Jake Cronenworth and the 8-10 pick, who ended up becoming Drew Anderson, over to the Arctic for Keegan Aiken and Lars Nootbaar. North Pole traded Kyle Teal and to the Soul Sovereigns. Kyle Teal making his return there after being taken in the expansion draft for a 2027 second-round pick. Cuyahoga traded Max Meyer to Fenton for Hassan Kim and Yorger Bautista. Keep Max Meyer in your brain because we're coming back to that in just a moment. The Arizona Asphalt traded Reynaldo Lopez to the Arctic Real Survivors for Fernando Cruz and a 2027 third-round pick. And finally, the last of the minor moves section, Fenton Melonheads traded Max Meyer and Wei and Lin to Sault Ste. Marie for Joey Cantillo. So I've already planted my flag on Joey Cantillo. Fenton Melonheads have him for this upcoming season, and I do think he's going to be a pretty impressive starting pitcher for Cleveland and in Fenton. Max Meyer is another name I really want to highlight. I think a lot of the hype on this guy fell off after his injuries. When he was on the field, he was great. And as he matures into the body a little bit more, finds better ways to stay healthy, if that can happen, I think this could be a really, really nice win-win trade for the Locks and the Melonheads there. Okay, we're moving down to it. Just a handful of trades left. Of course, the Ace and Bombs, Ace Passin, our own newsbreaker. These were, in my opinion, the real deal trades. These are the big ones where you saw pretty significant players, or in the case of one of these picks, being moved. So our first one is Sault Ste. Marie, who traded Sal Stewart, I mentioned, who was taken in the expansion draft earlier. They traded Sal Stewart, Jeff Hoffman, and Evan Carter over to the Washington State Winners for Jose Altuve, Carson Williams, and Mark Vientos. So on Mike's side with the Winners, he's getting first base, Sal Stewart, who is, I think, across the league, kind of one of the trendy breakout picks. Dropped a bunch of weight this offseason, still got massive power. Jeff Hoffman, great reliever other than that pitch in the World Series. And Evan Carter, who's just a solid center fielder for the Rangers. Over on Sault Ste. Marie's side, they got Jose Altuve, who is still doing it at second base. He's not great defensively anymore, but that doesn't really matter for us, and he still hits like crazy. Carson Williams, who was really a big-time prospect for the Rays, had a little bit of trouble in his first year, but he's still very young and should definitely be at least a good major leaguer, if not a great one. I would lean towards the second there. And Mark Vientos, who obviously had that great 2024 with the Mets, down 2025. We'll see if he can kind of recapture that magic here. The Bronx Bandoleros traded Jurickson Profar and Moises Ballesteros over to the Southwest Kansas Rabid Coyotes for pick 212, which became Jace Laviolette, and 214, which became Francisco Renteria. So the Bandoleros kind of loading up on some young talent here in the draft. I really like both those picks in Laviolette and Renteria. And Southwest Kansas getting a couple great hitters. Ballesteros is, I think, supposed to be something pretty special for the Cubs. And is likely to factor into their catching situation. And Jurickson Profar, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, after coming off of that PED suspension, was great last year. So we'll see how all that works out for Oki, who I know definitely needed some outfield help. Cuyahoga traded Kyle Manzardo and Matthew Liberatore over to Washington State for Rafael Devers. I was shocked by this trade on both accounts, I have to say. Surprised that Serial Chillers, Cleveland fan, would give up Kyle Manzardo, and surprised that Mike would give up Rafi Devers, who, another flag I'm going to plant. Dude can still hit. I know he's in San Francisco, and that park doesn't fit him as well as Fenway, but he is such a good hitter still. I think that's going to be a great pickup for Cuyahoga. On the other side, though, Mike gets volume. Liberatore is a great sort of middle-of-the-order guy. He's that awesome 3 type guy. And those are really valuable in fantasy. Fun fact about Liberatore, if any of you remember who he was traded for, it was Randy Arozarena. That was the ill-fated Cardinals trade when they sent him to the Rays, and did end up getting Liberatore out of that. And then Kyle Manzardo, who is a little bit positionless, but obviously has that big pop, 27 home runs last year, so big stuff there. We are coming now to a Portland trade where the Portland Pioneers sent Teoscar Hernandez and Harlan Susana over to Cuyahoga for Bryce Terang. Teoscar, obviously, in that Dodgers lineup, does damage, and Harlan Susana is one of the Washington Nationals' top pitching prospects. So a couple solid pieces heading over there for Cuyahoga. And then on my side, I got my second baseman, which I desperately needed. I had hoped Christian Campbell would be that guy last year. Seems like second base is not his long-term home once he returns to the big leagues this year. And I was able to run through with Xander, but he no longer has second base. So I was hunting second base, and I got, in my opinion, one of the 3 best in the league in Bryce Terang. And of course, the other piece of this is that Cuyahoga has Travis Bazzana coming up sooner rather than later. So chance for him to fill that hole. Another Portland trade, as I sent Jung-Hoo Lee over to Sault Ste. Marie to acquire back Wilyer Abreu and take on Sault Ste. Marie's 2027 first-round pick. So now have 2 picks in that first round next year, along with swapping out Wilyer for Jung-Hoo Lee. Of course, KJ Lee gets his Lee, and I do get my guy Wilyer back, who will be starting to face lefties this year and hopefully can, put up some more of those counting stats to match some of the rate stats that we've seen as he's been a little bit more protected in the past couple of years. Third Portland trade in a row. Again, obviously not trying to highlight too much of my stuff here, but pretty big guys or picks moved in all of these trades, so I do want to go over them. Alex Bregman, Joe Musgrove, and round 6, pick 2, which ended up becoming Josh Nixon Garcia, the password, were sent over to Southwest Kansas for Dylan Cease, Eugenio Suarez, and pick 5 in round 7. So just a little bit of a pick swap there. But the center of the trade was Bregman for Cease and Musgrove for Suarez. Obviously, God, what is there to say here? Cease, phenomenal pitcher. Joe Musgrove coming off the injury, but has been a workhorse up until then. Bregman, we know what he does on the field. To explain my rationale a little bit, I'm concerned about his profile moving to Wrigley as he gets a little older. You could say the same thing about Eugenio Suarez with those strikeouts, but at the same time, the guy's posted almost 40 home runs basically every year for the past half decade. So I'll definitely take a bat on that. But Southwest Kansas, the Rabid Coyotes, they are getting just some phenomenal consistency and like true top-end talent in Alex Bregman. So big trade there. And then the final one of our ASIN bombs is the Joinville Friendly Capybaras trading Shane Smith and Taylor Ward, who quietly such a good power hitting outfielder. Taylor Ward heading over to Sault Ste. Marie for Ivan Herrera. So Herrera obviously going back to Joinville. I mentioned him earlier how good he is in that Cardinals lineup. And then Taylor Ward, who will have kind of the 1 year in Baltimore to establish some value before he hits free agency. And I expect him to really do that. So got to be on Sault Ste. Marie's team. And I think this is honestly pretty balanced trade for both sides. Okay, we're almost there, folks. 3 more trades. 1, which was history-making, and then 2, which are just simply inexplicable. Our first, I'm calling a menage a trade. Yes, the league's first 3-way trade. So I approached Al Martinet looking to acquire a catcher. I really like Shea Langoliers. Not a shock there. Had a little bit of an excess of starting pitching. So we discussed a Langoliers for Bryce Miller swap. That one in general felt relatively fair to both sides, or something both sides agreed on. But Al Martinet and the Valley Gift Lords wanted Yainer Diaz back from me. Couldn't quite find the piece on his roster that fit to come back in my direction. So we decided to bring in a third party. And that third party was Min, who we know is always up for a trade. That piece, quote-unquote, coming back for Yainer on my side, ended up being Garrett Whitlock, who is the Red Sox setup guy. As long as he's in the bullpen, he is phenomenal. And projecting forward a little bit, I don't think Chapman's long for the league. And when he retires, I fully believe Garrett Whitlock will be the Red Sox closer. From a dynasty perspective, that helps out a little bit too. I'm getting Shea Langoliers, who is, again, top 3 catcher, in my opinion. Giving up a guy like Bryce Miller, who obviously has all the talent in the world and had that unbelievable 2024, was hard. I consoled myself a little bit. There was a lot of luck involved. You don't want to say luck, but just the underlying stats didn't totally back up the results of his 2024 season. So I will be, whispering that to myself as I'm rocking back and forth while he's putting up 30-point starts for the Valley Gift Lords all season long. And then, of course, Yainer Diaz going the other way, and I'm happy to make that trade for Shea Langoliers. So how we made this all work is by making kind of another big swap between the other 2 teams. So the big piece that the Arctic Real Survivors wanted was Jesus Luzardo, and they did manage to pull him away from the Gift Lords in exchange for Matt McLean, Nick Mears, and Ryan Sloan. Along with Luzardo going back to the Real Survivors, we had Dylan Lee and Luis Angel Acuna. So pretty fun to do a 3-way trade. It's the first one. I doubt it will be the last one, but that was obviously pretty cool, and I feel like we all got out with kind of what we were hoping for out of it. So in some ways, isn't that the best part? Everyone ended up happy. And finally, the most inexplicable category of all time. After he was traded from Edmonton, they said if Wayne Gretzky can be traded, anyone can be traded. And I thought that was true until I encountered this man. And I thought it was impossible that anyone could even fathom to trade Jeffrey Springs. Yet, we saw the Arctic Real Survivors trade Ezekiel Tovar to the Cuyahoga Black Panthers for pick 4-1, who became Luis De Leon, 5-1, which became Colin Phillips, and Jeffrey Springs. So we did see Arsenal. God damn it, I did it again. We saw the Arctic Real Survivors acquire the GOAT himself, Jeffrey Springs. The GOAT was traded once, but the GOAT would be traded again, folks, as the Arizona Asphalt traded Nolan Arenado and 8-6, which would become Nick Mears. Interestingly enough, I'm just noticing that Nick Mears, who was involved in the three-way trade, along with Eric Sabrowski for Jeffrey Springs. So Jeffrey Springs, the GOAT himself, thank God for him. He will start the season on Arizona's team, and let's just hope Ace has the foresight to hold on to the greatest player in Lollygaggers Dynasty baseball history. Well, thank you all for sticking with me this long. We will wrap up with just a final few notes. See, we're about 55 minutes in. What is next? Let's talk about it. 4 things we're going to touch on here. Actually, just 3 things. Pardon me. We already covered one of these. 3 things we're going to touch on here. The first one is a revote that will be coming down. I believe only one vote actually separated it. And afterwards, there were a lot of people who were just like, can we revote on this with the new teams? They gave some really, really solid arguments. So I'll be independently reaching out to everybody to vote on a buy-in for the league. It'll not be a super expensive buy-in. I would probably look at like $15 to $20. But there were, I think, a lot of people who brought up some really good points after the voting passed, and that did not end up going through. So we are just going to do a revote. We will stick by the results of this revote. So with the 2 new teams in, if we're still not, if it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass. But given some of the arguments that were made, it did kind of feel right to revote on this. Then the next thing is the 2027 FYPD. As of right now, it is set to have 5 rounds. We can talk about this a little bit in the Discord about kind of how everybody feels about that. The plan for next year is to require roster cuts ahead of the first-year player draft. What that would mean is you get to make as many draft picks as you would like. If you feel really, really solid about your roster and there aren't really guys out there that you want to make those adds to, you don't need to make cuts, and your picks will just be skipped like we saw them be skipped this year. If you're a rebuilding team and you really want to stock up on that young talent, you can maybe dump some of those unranked prospects and some of the older major leaguers you don't need and really pile up on guys. So if there are anybody with really strong opinions, I mean, obviously the idea of trading out like a fifth of your minor leaguers is kind of crazy, but I don't think most people will be doing that. The other piece I do think is valuable in it is it just gives smaller increments to trade in. So like trading a third is not nothing. We saw some really good players go in the 3rd round, but trading a 5th, like if, we're kind of looking for that kicker, it can be really valuable to some people if they're trying to stock up on those picks. It can kind of be another, like it just adds those extra sort of incremental, things that can be traded. So that is kind of my thoughts there. We'll discuss it a little bit more in the Discord, but that is kind of roughly the plan, to have 5 rounds next year, and just have that kind of, if your pick gets skipped, it's skipped system. And the last thing is what is coming up next on the podcast. So for those of you who listen to either Talkin' Yanks or Talkin' Baseball, this idea will sound pretty familiar to you. But starting 14 days before the MLB season kicks off, we will start releasing little mini episodes daily. We're going to be calling them PSPs, preseason projections. They're going to be little mini episodes, probably 10 to 15 minutes each. We haven't recorded them yet, so I actually don't know. I'm guessing around, somewhere between 5 and 15 minutes, probably around 10. Just kind of covering a few things for the team. Big ads in the offseason, what their lineup and rotation look like, how some of those players rank within sort of the overall dynasty ranking. Now, I'll talk a little bit more about that later, just where I'm getting those rankings from. So kind of highlighting some key players, where they finished last year, possible prospects we might see, and then Ace and I will make record predictions and playoff predictions, whether they will make the playoffs or not, for all the teams. So in case you have not put it together yet, that is what that power ranking survey I've sent out is for. And I'm kind of just, ranking it in sort of golf score order. So the lower your total number of place votes are, the higher you will be up on the list. So those will release once a day leading up to the final one, the number 1 team, which will come out March 24th, the day before opening day. So I hope that'll be kind of just a fun primer for the season. I know I am itching to get started myself. I know the same is true, of course, for all the rest of you. To stop myself from making trades just to make trades because I want to do dynasty stuff. But thank you for hanging out with me. It was great to be back in the podcast. And we will be back soon with Ace as well. Looking forward to the season, and thanks for all the off-season support and feedback. Y'all are such a great group. I can't wait to see what this year brings. Have a good one.
Do you know what that makes you, Larry?
Lollygaggers.
Lollygaggers.